So how do you get a standing ovation? Well, my name is Benji Bruce. I'm with SpeakingLifestyle.com, and in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I get standing ovations. I'm going to show you clips from my presentations. That way you can see what it is I'm doing. Now, a lot of speakers, whenever they think about standing ovations, they think in terms of, oh, I don't really need a standing ovation, or do I need one? Well, the basics, the reason why you want to get a standing ovation isn't for your ego, it's more for the meeting planner, because when a meeting planner hires you as a speaker, they bring you on stage, they want to know what an audience thought of you. So in order for them to see the standing ovation, well, if they want proof, they can see the standing ovation, they see the tangible proof of what the audience thought about you. But let's go into how you do it. There's no trick. I'm not talking about like a trick as far as doing it, telling people to like, oh, stand up and do this thing. And no, this is like how to get a real standing ovation. First thing is the context. You have to understand the context of your situation, because that has a big influence on how people respond to you as a speaker. If you are doing a small workshop, you're guaranteed not to get a standing ovation no matter how great your presentation is, just because a small environment means that people are used to talking one-on-one, and when you're talking with people in like a group of 10, they're not going to give you a standing ovation, because it's more like, oh, okay, yeah, let's talk to this guy. It's more intimate. But if the context is like a theater type of setting, where I call a theater setting, where it's a bigger group, the bigger the group, the more likely you are to get a standing ovation. So just understand the context of that. Here's what you have to do to get a standing ovation. First thing, you have to understand that you are the only person on stage. So if you do a lot of demonstrations like what I do, you have to make sure that you're the only person on stage, because the audience, when the whole presentation is done, they need to clap for you and your presentation, not for the demonstration that you're doing with someone else on stage. So you can confuse an audience really easily, to where if you have other people on stage, you're doing other things on stage with people, they might be thinking, okay, let's clap for this one thing versus the entire presentation. So make sure you're the only person on stage. Next, you want to just make sure that you let them know that, okay, this is the end, where you say, look, thank you guys, I had a great time. This is going to be the very last thing I'm going to do. This is going to be the very last story I'm going to say. This is going to be the very last whatever. They have to understand that this is the ending to your presentation, because it prepares them mentally, okay, this is the ending, this is what we've been waiting for, this is the finale. This is the very last thing I'm going to do. I'd like to thank you guys. And this is the last thing I'm going to do, by the way. So you have to let them know this is the end, and that way they're ready to clap. Because, I mean, if people don't know it's the end, then they might all of a sudden just clap just a little bit, because they think that, okay, you're going to go on and do something else. So let them know that this is the end of your presentation. Now, by the way, I do want to point out, your entire presentation has to be great for you to get a standing ovation, but these last few minutes really do matter. So once you point out, okay, it's coming to an end, now the very last thing you do, it almost always has to involve a lot of energy. If you don't do something with a lot of energy, it's going to be 10 times harder to get a standing ovation, because what energy does is it essentially creates a tension in the room, to where people are sitting there, there's a lot of energy, they're like, whoa, 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 and they're kind of getting blown away, and then bam, the claps at the end, it releases that energy. So from my presentation, I do this thing involving slam poetry, mind reading, and motivation, and I'm practically yelling by the end. I'm like doing this slam poem, I'm like, how do I know? And I'm like yelling at the end. So it has this huge energy factor to it. So figure out what it is you need to do with energy, with a lot of energy at the end. The audience is going to feed off of you.
It's 43, 43, 43, 43. I see that good is not good enough. Mediocrity has replaced exceptional, and that if you dream, you need to take action to succeed.
So make sure you have a lot of energy towards the end, where it's literally the end. You're done, and here's something brilliant that you should do. It's very simple. It's almost like you're telling the audience to stand without really telling them to stand. So just as you're done, just as you say, bam, 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 here's my last story or whatever. Bam, you're done with the story. Now you say thank you, and then you kind of raise your hands a little bit, kind of like how you tell people to stand. It's like how you tell people to stand. but you spread it out like you're doing a bow. So you spread your hands out like you're doing, I'll show a clip of it in a second, but you spread it out like you're doing a bow, and you bow, but at the same time your hands come up as well. So you bow and your hands are coming up. This essentially tells people like, okay, bam, it's done. You're bowing, which signals a complete end of your presentation, but you're also raising your hands, and it subtly tells them to stand up. So that little bow thing, it really has a huge influence over people. And then what's going to happen is some people are going to stand up first. When you see people stand up, you immediately point to them. You kind of just do that. And then you kind of bow again. You do the same bow movement while raising your hands. You're essentially rewarding good behavior. So you see someone stand up and you're like, okay, you thank them and you bow again, and then bam. And you just essentially just keep doing that, really. You should only do it, the only times you really need to do it is just twice, maybe 3 times. But after that, if you don't do it, if you don't stand after the 3rd time, they're not going to stand at all. Thank you. But the basics of your presentation, it really involves, number one, you have to understand the context. Is it a bigger group? That's where you're more likely to get a standing ovation. Then you have to understand, make sure you're the only person on stage so they know it's the end. Well, tell them it's going to be the end here. And then you have to make sure you have tons of energy towards the end, because I've seen speakers where they don't have the energy towards the end, and that just kills a standing ovation. And then, of course, you simply just do the hand raising, the bow movement. You point to the person who stood up first to reward them. You bow again, and you kind of acknowledge them. You bow again, and you're like, thanks, I'm the man. And well, no, you don't do that, but just remember, the standing ovation is for the meeting planner. It's not for your ego. It's really just because you want the meeting planner to have tangible proof that you are a great speaker, and by having that standing ovation, it really shows it. Thank you.